Hi, this is Lolita Cros introducing my new studio visit series, Eye to Eye, a conversation between two artists where they discuss their work, their inspirations, and ongoing projects. Today we're traveling to Richmond, Virginia, to Monsieur Zohore's studio, whom I've set up on a studio date with painter Cynthia Daignault. Monsieur Zohore is a performer, sculptor, painter, storyteller, and self-proclaimed clown whose work approaches history through a humorous yet chilling lens. He has gained notoriety in the last few years with projects at the Baltimore Museum of Art, Columbus Museum of Art, and most recently, the Sculpture Center. Cynthia Daignault's meticulous painting series meditate on the past to reflect on the present. Exhibited at the Met Museum, the Baltimore Museum of Art, and in the most recent new Museum Triennial.
Besides the fact that you guys both have this connection with Maryland, you were born there, you lived there, you both kind of touch on this relationship with history, whether looking at American history, colonial history, looking into pop culture and how the history has impacted it. Why don't we start with this piece over here, because I think it's the one that just got back from...
This one came back from Antwerp. It's called To the People of Antwerp, with love from the horse of Leopold II, and it's a rocking horse filled with horse shit that was specifically sourced from Antwerp. Over the run of the show, the horse feces was replaced inside of the sculpture. It has like a secret compartment on the inside where you place the little animal feces in there. The whole gallery smells like this, And then you walk downstairs in the basement, and then you see this like dirty, sexy S&M thing.
Childlike,
sexy, childlike. Is kind of what I was like, what I was joking around as I started putting it together.
But you were joking with a touch of dark humor, which is the history between Congo.
Thinking about the Congo and thinking about Belgium, thinking about all those statues of Leopold II, on a horse, being in Congo, in Antwerp, and thinking about what kind of gift would you give that kind of person, Like thinking about how to infiltrate that kind of space. So if you think about Belgian colonialism, they still thought they were doing this country a service, by reaping all of their natural resources, cutting off everybody's hands, and doing all these kind of really violent things. But it was still in the name of a kind of advancement, maybe not necessarily for the Congo, but for Belgium. And so rewarding that in some kind of way is always kind of a strategy I like using. It's oh yeah, thank you so much for your terrible nonsense. Here you go, It's kind of how I like to posture things, as opposed to feeling so overwhelmed by grief by something that you can't move, It's always easier to make, it's not easier, it's always more enriching to make a joke.
I like also joining that lineage of art that uses shit.
Yeah.
The artist shit.
Yeah, Manzoni, and Ophelia, and it's an underused material. Blood and shit were the original painting materials of the cave wall, of the hand wiping on the cave wall, So it's brave to be that guy.
There's always that feeling of maybe this is a little too much, And then whenever I have that thought, I actually keep moving, because it's. I tell myself that, if I'm thinking that it's too much, then I think we're in the right place,
Going back to the monument aspect of it, it reminds me also of your last body, or one of your last body of work, which is the Gettysburg, and the kind of looking back at a historical monument and something that's wholly in the American culture and questioning it.
I think all of us have been wrestling as a country with the idea of monument. Is it a real history? Is it a manufactured history? It's not surprising that I think many artists are taking on the idea of monument.
I recently remade the big Gauguin painting, where are we going?
Yeah.
That one. And so I've been kind of slowly tackling all the greats, And I was trying to think about what I could do to Guernica to make it make sense right now. It's been popping back up in the zeitgeist because of the war and everything else that's happening.
Really, the Ukrainian war.
The Ukrainian war.
This is also in a lineage which is really thick, which is artists taking on Guernica. We can connect it to Ukraine, to toxic masculinity, to toxic whiteness.
Yeah. So I was starting to think about like the education of that. Like, why do we learn about this horrific event? And thinking about what is the way that we learn American ideologies. Like talking about my immigrant parents, they were all watching cowboy movies back in Africa. You know, it's like the idea of the Western continues to pervade is how we are taught, taught ideas of empire and things like that. So I thought it'd be really funny if I made a painting of Guernica with a bunch of fictional cowboys, like Howdy Doody and Lucky Luke, you know, and like this kind of survey of all of these things. I find it so great that I don't have to do that much work as an artist, you know, like especially because like the symbols and images do so much work for you, you know. There's a privilege in knowing the reference that I'm making, and there's a privilege in not knowing, you know. Also, my favorite thing about these images is that they're taught to children. Any image that kind of confronts the idea, a masculine image also. Like the paper towels is kind of the way I address making paintings, because it's making a mess and cleaning up a mess at the same time. This history is so messy that that's the way that I'm able to absorb that all of that into the surface of the paper towel.
It's a very primal, like child nostalgic connection to like. You've got the theme of the masculine cowboy with the like domestic material of the paper towel, and of course like the high-low. Should I call them paintings?
I think.
Are they objects?
I think of them as objects. I started calling them paintings as like a pervasive title for them, you know?
Yeah. Well, this is what I was. This is a question I have for you. I mean, these come from a sincere place, obviously, and they're part of your practice. But in an ideal world, if you had like all the money in the world and everybody wanted to let you do whatever you wanted, like, would you make wall-based work?
I don't know how many I would make a year.
Like, there's a lot of market pressure to put it on the wall. Yeah. You know, and it's like, yeah, you do so much exciting stuff, like your performances and your sculptures and stuff, that it's like, there should be more support for that work. People buy sculptures. You know, viewers buy a sculptor. Yeah.
Do you want this one?
Is that why your paintings are just not one single paintings? Most of the time, they're just like a wide series
how did that
of
happen
paintings.
for you?
I think it was definitely partially a market reaction. You know, I was very leftist, like anti-capitalist, you know, like still a person, you know, still am, like, and I think you struggle. It's funny, like you become an artist because you're that kind of person and because you have things to say and things to engage with, and I found art to be this like incredible medium where you could share ideas, thoughts, have a thesis, but create an experience also, like a visual experience. Then you become an artist and like you realize like, oh no, I'm not outside the market. I am the market. I am an unregulated commodity market. And I think people have a complicated way that they deal with that reality, and the market's stronger now than it ever was. And like, I think everybody deals with that their own way, and everybody like F's with that their own way, or lean into it. You know, like so many of the artists I was really interested in at the time were not painters. You know, I was working at the Felix Gonzalez Torres Foundation, and I love Felix, and Felix is like an angel floating above the sky. I was really interested in work that was immersive and site-specific, that could respond to architecture, that could be malleable, that could change in different spaces, that could breathe, like expand and contract like a diaphragm, and painting this idea of like 10 paintings that are stylistically similar and the same size and go on the wall. Like, I also just couldn't do it. And I also, at the time, didn't have the ego for it. It was so much riding on one thing. And I was young and like very insecure. And I think working on multi-panel things, one can suck, and who cares? There's 100.
Market-wise, do I get one or do I get all 100?
No, all,
You get all 100.
Yeah, and I was the enemy. I was the enemy.
That's what I was hoping. You know.
But I mean, I'm the enemy. I was the enemy of the gallery. I mean, you know, like
I get it. I make paper towels.
Especially when I was young, I was okay with like taking an adversarial stance to my own profitability or the gallery's profitability at times. And you know, and I early on I had a lot of arguments with people, a lot, and I had to fight and fight and fight. And now it's not the case. Now people are like, oh, that's what you're known for. Make one of those for me. You know, like the first 10 years were not cool, but then you know, the market has a way of normalizing even the adversarial gestures. You know, so now I don't know how I feel about it because it's been like churned into normalcy, you know.
Yeah. You know, this painting is called Animal Lover, like it tells you, you know.
Who is this? This is
Betty White.
Betty White.
Yeah.
With
in a movie that I forget what the movie's called.
A mask.
Where she falls in love with a man, with like a man in a gorilla.
In a gorilla suit.
Yeah, exactly. But that person's supposed to be a gorilla, and then it flips into the image of like, you know, the old adages of like gorilla being black man.
I was going to say that's a crazy race allegory.
Betty White had just passed away, you know, and I was like, ooh, there's a lot to tackle here. There's a lot to deal with about Betty White's history that doesn't take away from how amazing of a woman she is and how funny she was and whatever. So I was invited to do a show at Pace, and the show was about humor, so they asked me, they said, don't hold back. And I was like, wow, cool. I don't really ever like kind of course correct. I don't ever kind of like pull punches for the audience, you know, but there's a scene in the Golden Girls where Dorothy's son is about to get married to this older black woman, and it's like a big controversy because she's black and she's older and whatever. And then the whole family comes over to Dorothy's house to like talk about it, the whole other black family. And then Rose and Blanche are doing a self-care day. And then they're in the kitchen putting on mud masks. And then they come out of the kitchen in the mud masks with the whole older black family staring at them. And it's hilarious. It's like, case in point, it's not blackface, it's really just funny.
When they're making fun of blackface.
They're making fun of blackface.
Yeah, they're making fun of people who do that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And nowadays, like, there's been a lot of, like, that episode's been taken off the internet because people are feeling like it's a little too sensitive to be on TV. And I'm like, it was never a problem. It was always really funny, you know?
I mean, they're making fun of closeted KKK guys.
Yeah, exactly. If I'm, like, ever invoking a female figure in a painting, I'm always trying to have her do something more complicated than just like whatever everybody else.
There.
So like farting and being mad, you know, and wearing a mask and whatever is a lot more exciting than just kind of her sitting there, you know. Looks like we made it, you know, like the Shania Twain song. And then it's the Turner slave ship painting.
Chains.
The chains, and then Christina Sharp's in the Wig, which is a book that postulates the idea of blackness as weather. You know, talks about slave ships and moving and grief and loss, but like the atmosphere and weather. It's like thinking about the ship leaving where it is and coming to where it is. You know, like that kind of relationship, and like what happens to our American ideology of what happened to all those people that came off those ships and came here. And like, it looks like we made it. Look how far we've come, my baby, you know?
The idea of the slave ship paired with that phrase, looks like we made it, considering, I forget, something insane, like 1/3 of the people who passed or 2/3
yeah, exactly.
didn't make it off the ship, you know?
Exactly.
Like, so like, looks like we made it is, it has many meanings, but one of them is also just thinking about like all those who died on those ships, like, which is...
Like this belongs to a larger set of paintings that I've been working on, you know, that deal with all kinds of ships and weather and things like that.
I mean, I've heard other Black artists I know describe it, but the downward pressure to make work about blackness.
Oh,
also.
yeah, exactly.
You know, about your blackness, about your experience, like,
you
know, and on one hand, yes, we all want to make works about ourselves and our experience, but sometimes we don't.
Yeah.
You know, like, do you feel excited by that, or does it feel stifling sometimes? I
think I always sit from a place where I remove it. I always talk about white people.
Yeah,
you know, as a way of talking about blackness. So that's kind of how that was my strategy.
That's interesting.
You know?
That's interesting.
And
it's like anti-blackness.
Anti-black, exactly. I just sit over here and I'm like, well, you guys do this in relation to my body doing this.
Othering the other.
Exactly. You know, which has positive and negative repercussions. You know, in terms of market. And it is nice to sit in a room full of collectors and be like, yeah, white people are terrible. And I'm like, okay, like, why did you feel the need to tell me that? I made this thing about you, and now you have it in your dining room, and now you're like sitting there telling your friends about how horrible the state of this thing is. I'm like, great, let's focus our money and our intention and resources to actually make some change, you know? You
have a very unique color identity. Like, where does where does that come from?
I'm always like kind of understanding color relationships as I engage through the world.
Through the world.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you borrow some from here and borrow some from here.
Exactly.
Do you think people worry about the like archivalness of it? Did galleries talk to you about that?
Yes.
Because the paper towel.
So one of my first shows in New York, my dealer asked me, like after the things hung on the wall and whatever, and he goes, "Do you really think this is worth it? Like the show's about to open," and I'm like, I guess that's a question. It's like, what is your relationship to the work's longevity? Like, because it's like you're at that like turning point in your career where that pressure is there. Yeah.
And like on one hand, you can take a really totalitarian stance. Like, I'm okay with the work decaying. Rot and decay is part of the work. Like, that's part of it.
Yeah.
And you will have to forever like defend that to collectors and hold that hardline stance. And like answer calls from people when something falls off, you know, like, or have some studio that fixes things the whole time you're making new work.
Yeah.
It's like, or you go the other route and you make them archival. Like, you know, both are good.
I've made them as archival as I can think of.
Yeah.
You know?
They're PVA.
It's like but I'm not using the PVA stuff is just like for little tiny touch-ups.
Oh yeah.
But what we use is this Jade 711.
Oh, Jade. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So that's, you know.
Very archival adhesive.
Very archival adhesive. I use an archival inkjet ink. The fabric dye is for industrial fabric dyeing, you know, so the colors are light fast in that respect. We also like deactivate the bleach with like a baking soda solution.
Oh wow.
You know, like
it's everything.
I've been working on this it's like a weird magic I came up I've been doing over the last like 12 years.
That's amazing.
And the ones from 10 years ago that were literally just Elmer's glue, whatever, are still fine.
Yeah.
And so these ones are like full of life. And also when the BMA like bought the painting and they like froze it and did all their crazy weird shit, they were happy with it.
Yeah.
And so as soon as that happened, I was like, fuck all of you.
Yeah. I mean, that's my thing is like, if I'm not alive, if I don't have to answer a phone call, I'm cool. I don't want to have to answer a phone call with some collector calling me and is like, this thing fell off. And I'm like, that's like, because I just can't handle the stress.
I have heard that I'm really great for museum acquisitions because they buy me as works on paper instead. So they have
different department.
Yeah, exactly. I go into a different department.
Right. And you can be in printmaking, you can be in drawing, you can be in painting. Whoever has the most
money buys the thing.
Right, buys the thing. And photography, you can be anywhere.
And I was like, sick, I don't care.
Yeah. I mean, that is smart, right?
You know?
Young artists out there, like check boxes.
Learn what you're making and figure out how to, you know.
I did this series at the Flag Foundation that was, you know, to me it was like a group show inside a solo show, basically. And I picked artists, a group of artists, I curated them, a group who work with appropriation, who work with copy as a theme, copying doubles, you know, et cetera, history of other artworks. And told them the concept of the show, that I would paint the works that they put in the show. And they picked the works. So most of the time I was surprised by what they picked and often horrified.
Why?
You know, because they were things that were really hard to paint or that I didn't think I could paint or that I was like, this one's ugly or weird or, you know, like it ended up being a challenge to myself that actually was really valuable because it pushes. If I had chosen something, I would have chosen based on my aesthetics. I would have chosen based on what I thought would make a good painting. I would have chosen, and it would have been, it wouldn't have been what it became, which is actually a collaboration, which is the mind of two people, you know, like why did they pick the works that they picked and like what did they care about? I'm up for all appropriation, but I don't necessarily cross all those lines myself because again, I don't like getting telephone calls, so.
Can you talk about this piece? You guys are talking about art fairs, and I think this is kind of a perfect example.
We made the togas, we made the table, and then there was a series of paintings that kind of dealt with like kind of ancient Greek realities.
Greek life?
Yeah, exactly, literally Greek life.
Yeah.
And here you go. So I hired 8 frat guys to organize a beer pong tournament outside of Nada in December.
I didn't see that one. That's
so
cool. In Miami, that's really fun.
In Miami, yeah, exactly. Like, you know, underneath the palm trees and the whole thing. So they would run around the fair and sign people up for the thing. And then at a certain time, a DJ met outside, you know, very like Miami, DJ, you know, showed up. And the frat guys were there, shirtless and doing their thing. And people in the fair came and started playing the beer pong. you know? The art world tries to pretend that it doesn't have this past, you know, of like its like normal identity of like playing, doing all these things. But immediately, as soon as it was like kind of kosher, you know, everyone turned back into who they actually were, you know?
Yeah.
It was very Midsummer's Night's Dream. You know? Everyone was back playing beer pong, remembering their days in college, doing all these things. And I was like, see, this history is like, is not so far away than you think, you know? Now you're out here trying to like talk about, you know, whatever Foucault, it doesn't mean that you don't remember, you know, that flip cup game you played.
But I think the art world itself has that kind of thing. It has that kind of hazing.
Also, this is the art world too. Like, you know, like this is what it is.
Culty feeling.
Exactly. Like
I see. That's cool. I hadn't even made that connection yet. But of course, it's like, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Miami Basel.
Miami
it's as close
Basel
as you get
is,
to the...
as you, I can say that I got most of my professional accolade of the things came from sitting in a bar with a bunch of bros.
People in New York talk about it sometimes, but I don't know if people have reckoned with it, that being a heavy drinker is like a huge asset to your career.
To your practice, yeah.
You know, like that, like, they always tell you, like, go to the after party, you'll meet everybody at the bar, like, go to all the parties. Like, you know, like, if you're the kind of person that can hang and stay up late and hang and talk to people and go to the parties, like, it's probably good for you.
Something's going to come of that.
Living in Richmond, you're in the South.
Do
you ever feel, like, what does it feel like to live here?
I was at a bar once in my Margiela tabbies, and this guy comes up to me, country dude, and goes, those shoes are real cool, real different. It looks interesting, but you know, I'm a Christian, and I can't be associated with anything that is Hooven.
No,
you know?
Hooven.
And I was like, please get away from me. Like, this means that I finally made it as a certain level as an artist. What are you talking about?
Like, there's a lot of racial tension here right now.
It is so, it's like
there's a lot of culture war going on.
Oh, completely.
There's a lot going on in Virginia. Like, that last election was really crazy.
Yeah.
Like, do you feel like it's good for your work, or do you feel like it's stifling?
I feel really completely inspired working here. At its core, I'm speaking about the history of this place, you know? And when the larger performances in Baltimore weren't necessarily grappling with like the cultural identity of the city, and that cultural identity is solely whiteness here. And to like unpack that, you step on a lot of people's fragile like egos about their like, you know, about their upholding this like this institution of whiteness that they have. You drive by the VMFA and you see the Kehinde Wiley Monument, and it's next to the Daughters of the American Confederacy that has like armored cars in front because people keep trying to like attack that building. And it's like seeing those two spaces together, and it's like, this is so disgusting.
This is like leaning to something that I was thinking about, which is that paper towel becomes a unit, the way that a brick is a unit, the way that Carl Andre used like the brick as a unit, you know, and that difference between a brick and a paper towel, between, you know, 19th century industrial materials and 20th century post-industrial materials. Yeah. It's like starting to lean into minimalism.
I mean that's what these are jokes about, you know? Like, I was like, oh yeah, how can I make these kind of like hysteric minimalist, you know, paper towel domesticity thing, you know, like take away all of the like male machismo of the minimalist like materiality thing, and like start doing whatever I can do with it, you know, the women's work of braiding and all these other things like that I find to be endlessly fascinating and interesting because of like my queer ideologies, but like because of the material, they also are, it implies a sense of endurance. You know? Like the feminine idea of endurance is something that I'm always like thinking about. It also just comes out of watching my mom. You know, it comes out of like watching my mom be an immigrant in the country. You know, like all these different things. And I'm always looking at like, you know, how much can you take and how long can I take it for? You know.
What are these little heads?
My little diapers.
What are they? They're diapers.
You know.
Oh, they are.
Yeah. They're diapers. They're just they're my little. I call them like girlfriends.
Love putting hair on objects.
I love putting hair on objects.
I love these things. Really take me back. These little hair ties.
Exactly.
These barrettes.
I don't know. A friend of mine had a kid, and I didn't realize how expensive an individual diaper is. You know. Yeah. For something that is so disposable, and like and in my language, anything that's disposable comes home. You know, like I have to figure out how to use. And so I started making these like little sculpture dudes these little girls, where they like smoke cigarettes in bathrooms, and like they're bad girls. They skip class. They have their own realities, you know. And I usually kind of install it in a bathroom next to a vent, next to like a hand dryer. So when you hand dry the hair, her hair goes in the wind. Explaining art to like my immigrant parents has always been kind of a big question for me, you know, because they don't understand what the usefulness of this thing is. Especially even like with my domestic leanings, they don't understand why the hell I'm doing an event, because they understand Picasso, right? Yeah. They understand like oil on canvas. And I'm like, for me, these are a reflection of you. You know, this is a reflection of like the history that I grew up in, you know, like the resourcefulness of material, the resourcefulness of identity.
Resourcefulness, that's a nice word, you know, for that.
Your arte povera.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you for
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us here. Yeah.
Thank you for having me in your studio.
No, of course. Thank you for coming. Thank you both all for coming. This is so wonderful.